Alrighty then. February is coming to a close, and it's hard to believe. I know we got skewed a week when I was missed a week in January, and we carried 1 week over into February. But it's hard to believe that February has just kind of gotten away from us. And I hate to leave the month of February without going back and reflecting on the metaphysical meaning of the movie Groundhog Day. At least the metaphysical meaning. To me, that's one of my favorite movies, and I hope you've seen it. I think everybody has, but if you haven't, you got to watch it. Bill Murray, of course, is a zany TV reporter who's sent out to Puxatawney, Pennsylvania, to cover whether or not the groundhog sees its shadow, and somehow, through the mysteries of the universe, he gets stuck in a loop, and every day he wakes up is Groundhog Day, over and over and over. Now, teachers have always used stories as ways of illustrating points. You know, there's something about the story. Vernon Howard says this in his book Psychopictography, that when a teacher tells a story, creates a visual image through storytelling, that story stays with the audience long after the image does. It stays with the audience long after the details of the sermon are gone, the lesson after they're gone. So a teacher may give a little parable and then talk for 30 minutes about what the parable means. But in a week's time, nobody remembers those 30 minutes, but they do remember the parable. Something very powerful in the imagery of using stories to teach. And this is why they've been around since before recorded history, since before people could read and write. And you have to remember this, right? That a lot of what you and I are reading today in ancient scriptures, people in those times couldn't read. Somebody had to read it to them. So a lot of the teaching was in the form of parables. You know, you have the stories of the Good Shepherd, and people get that, you know. So they hear the story about the Good Shepherd, but they understand that that's kind of like a metaphor for the relationship between themselves and God. God is the Good Shepherd. We are the good sheep. And of course, in that culture, the relationship between shepherd and sheep is much different than what we would know today. The sheep were beloved. They were like pets. The shepherd knew the names of every sheep, and this is why in the New Testament it's told, you know, the good shepherd knows the sheep, calls them by their name, loves them, knows every hair on our heads, those kind of things. So there's something about this, you know, even Aesop's fables, when we were kids growing up, we might have heard Aesop's fables, and you hear the Aesop's fable, and even though they came to us from Greece, and they came to us thousands of years ago, we get it. You know, the parable of the fable of the sour grapes. You know, the wolf was trying to jump up and get the grapes and couldn't reach them, and then finally decided, well, they're probably sour anyway. You know, we get that. We understand that people do that. They want something, and then they can't have it, and then they decide, well, there must be something wrong with that. This idea of a theme, a moral theme, behind the story. You know, the story works at two levels. We hear the story and it creates a picture and we you know, that's the beautiful thing I think about reading as opposed to watching a movie. When we read a book, we create the imagery. Sure, the author has kind of given us clues and maybe describing the scene, but we fill in the blanks. You see, we use our imagination and we fill in the blanks, and then that scene becomes ours. I was reading a book a month or so ago that someone recommended to me, and I was reading through it, and the author in the first few chapters described this homestead setting, where the house was and where the barn was and where the fields were and where the creek was and every kind of detail about where this couple lived out in the wilderness. And as I was reading along, I got a few more chapters in, and I started to read, and the author was talking about how long it took the it took the man to get from the barn back to the house. And I stopped and I said, well, this is wrong. This is wrong, because the barn was much closer to the house. If the picture that I created in my mind in the earlier chapters, the barn was much closer to the house. And I had to go back and read. I had to go back and find it. And sure enough, in the 2 descriptions of the layout of the homestead, things changed, something changed. And my only point in telling you that is that the image that I created was so real to me that the instant that something was introduced in that story didn't fit, I knew it. I knew it. See, I remembered the image. I remembered the picture. So modern day motion pictures, they work the same way. And in fact, if you study screenwriting, you're told that there's kind of like a premise of the movie, what the movie is about, but then there's a theme, and the theme is usually the moral teaching that goes along with the movie. It kind of carries it through. So the movie works, at the surface level. We have this funny comedy about this man who's stuck in a loop over and over and over again. But at a deeper level, we start to relate to that. At a deeper level, we start to relate. There's been times in my life where I felt like I was stuck in a loop, where I felt like I was doing the same things over and over and over again. And I didn't quite know how to get out of that loop. Another example might be, right now the comic book superhero movies are very popular. And an underlying theme in many of those is that good will always prevail over evil. Some of them are about how the power of friendship will be able to overcome all obstacles. So you have kind of 2 superheroes come together and they form this bond, this friendship. But keep this in mind as you're watching movies. There's something going on there. There's the surface. We see things at the surface. We see the comedy. We see Bill Murray going through all of the things that he's going through. But at a deeper level, we relate to that. We relate to that. So today we're talking about, what do you do when you're stuck in a rut? Have you ever been stuck in a rut? And if you've ever been stuck in a rut, what do you do about it? What do you do about it? So the first thing that we have to come back to is something that we have been talking about. Essentially, we talk about it every week in different ways, but we go back and we focus on it the first part of the year. And we just stop, just take a deep breath and step back for a minute. And what we are talking about is that we live in a spiritual universe. And the activity of spirit is thought. And there's something in this universe, a power in this universe, much like gravity is a power that interacts with matter, for lack of a better way to describe it. There is a power that interacts with our thought. And the circumstances that we have in our lives are the outpicturing of the sum total of what we believe. Now that belief may be at a conscious level. By that I mean that we are aware of the belief. Or that belief may be at a subconscious level. And by that I mean we are not. Our conscious mind is not aware that we believe it. But in our subjective mind, or in that part of our mind that we are not usually aware of, we still believe it. It is still there. And of course, we believe that which we call our consciousness, your consciousness and my consciousness, is connected to all consciousness through what Carl Jung would call the collective consciousness, or what Ernest Holmes called the race consciousness. We are all waves on the same ocean, and once you get down beneath the surface, we are all connected. This work, if you would refer back to Carl Jung's work on man and his symbols, he talks a lot about this. Why is it that people from different times and different cultures and different places, we kind of have the same symbols arise, and attribute similar meanings to them. Joseph Campbell in some of his works points that out, that if you look at the mythology of the native peoples of different parts of the world, almost every culture has a mythology about where food came from. And the mythology is very much the same if you get past the surface level, which is the costumes of the culture, you know. So to the Plains Indians out west, you know, it was a white buffalo calf woman, but to the Plains Indians, the Iroquois, the Algonquian Indians further east, it was about corn. And to the South Pacific Islanders, it was about the coconut trees. And to the people in Ireland, it was about the seals in the ocean. And it's just this idea of this intimate relationship between the God, whoever the God might be, or whatever the God might be in that culture, and the people, the food. The food is not only a gift from the God, but the food is the God becoming the very food that the people eat. So this similar idea, the same idea, arises out of human consciousness across different cultures. In Man and His Symbols, Carl Jung goes into that a little bit more. My point is we are connected. We are connected at this level of race consciousness. And therefore we are subject to experiencing the consequences of what race consciousness believes in, as long as we believe that too. And by that, there's kind of a caveat in that we don't have to consciously believe it. But if we don't consciously do something to counteract it, we can experience the result. We can experience the consequences. If race consciousness believes in the need for so many people out of 100 to be sick, and we just accept that. You watch the TV and they say it's the cold and flu season, you know, and those kind of things. If we don't stop at that moment and negate that, you know, I love Reverend James up in Durham used to say, cancel and replace. Imagine you're standing in front of a blackboard. Of course, today it would be a whiteboard. When I went to York Tech a few years ago and took some courses, one of the young people there said, did they really have chalk and blackboards when you were a kid in school? You know, and I didn't stop to think about it, because now it's all whiteboards and dry erase. But when something comes up that you do not want to experience in your life, you do not want to be attached to that, you pretend that you've got a little eraser, and it appears on a blackboard or a whiteboard in front of you, and you just erase it. That's cancel. And then you replace, and you create this image in your head. You write in there, what is it that you want to experience? Perfect health, you know. So you might picture yourself erasing cold and flu season and writing in there perfect health season, something like that. A deliberate act, a deliberate conscious act to make sure that you are keeping your consciousness filled with the mental equivalent of that which you wish to experience. So the first thing that we have to kind of wrestle with, and we spent, you know, all of January and in part of February, and now we're hitting it one more time. The first thing we have to come to is this belief, this idea that the things that I experience in my life are not just related to the physical, but what I think and what I believe has an impact on them. And you have to work with that idea to see whether or not you truly believe it. You know, so the simplest example we've given is: can you imagine someone who's trying to give a talk in public, and a person in the first row takes a fresh lemon and cuts the lemon in half in front of the speaker, and picks this lemon up and starts sucking on this lemon and making slurping noises and making sourpuss faces? What do you think is going to happen to the person speaking? Well, if they engage in that charade that's going on in front of them, right? Their mouth will start to water. They'll find it hard to speak. They'll start to pucker up. You know, when people become embarrassed, their skin flushes. There's no doubt that there are physiological changes in our body as a result of what we think. I just picked up another piece this morning on the internet where they're talking about broken heart syndrome, where people who don't have anything physiologically wrong with their heart can experience the same effects as a heart attack if they suffer a deep emotional loss, like somebody who loses a spouse or a pet and their broken heart. So they call it the broken heart syndrome. So we can understand that within our own body, that our thoughts outpicture in our body. That should not be hard for us to convince ourselves of, you know. Now we say, well, does that mean everything, you know? And the pure answer to that is yes, but we haven't learned how to work at that level yet. You know? So we can do little, you might want to call them parlor tricks of making your mouth water and things like that. But nevertheless, even when we get into health, and as we were talking on the Wednesday night class, you know, this idea that there's a placebo effect. Herbert Benson wrote a book and he said, let's stop calling it the placebo effect. Let's start calling it remembering wellness. And who is studying this thing called the placebo effect? And how does it work? And how is it that what we believe can actually create physical symptoms in our body? Not imaginary symptoms, but physical symptoms. And how is it that changing that belief can make those physical symptoms go away? So we start small and we say to ourselves, there's something there. There's something that responds to us according to our belief. And we go, but what about, you know, what about outside of ourselves? And then we can look at all of the different psychology and self-help literature. You know, change your thinking, change your life, positive mental attitude. You know, all of these different things. Norman Vincent Peale's teachings. But by the way, Ernest Holmes said, you know, if you're in New York City, go to Norman Vincent Peale's church. You'll hear a good message. We start to realize then that as we change our consciousness, the circumstances around us change. And then we have to kind of accept the idea that we are surrounded by our mental atmosphere. Some people might call it, you know, your aura. They can see your aura and they can see the colors in your aura and they can see images in your aura, and that may very well be so. I do believe there's a sense. We do get a sense when we're near someone, when we come into someone's presence. We get a sense immediately, you know, if we like them or we don't like them or we should be cautious or not. We see this with animals. You know, the animals might growl at somebody or they might just naturally be attracted to somebody. There's something about that person that dog or the animal picks up on. But we want to start with this premise then that we are surrounded by this mental atmosphere. We are surrounded by the sum total of our consciousness. We are surrounded by the sum total of things that we believe. That is, we accept them to be true. Whether we are aware that we have accepted them to be true or not. And as I said earlier, if we don't negate them, if we don't deliberately negate them, we've accepted them to be true. Don Miguel tells us this in the four agreements, right? If you don't shake your head no, you've accepted it. You've accepted whatever's going past. Now that doesn't mean that every time we're in a room and somebody says something that we don't agree with, that we stand up and say, you know, you're wrong. That's a good way to lose friends and influence people. But we say to ourselves, this is important, we say to ourselves, well, that's not my truth. That may be their truth, but that's not my truth. That may be their truth, but that's not my truth. So now we come to this launching place for today where we can say, if everything we experience is a result of what we believe, either at a level of conscious awareness or at a level of subjective awareness, then what does it mean when patterns start to emerge in my life? Patterns. And this is one of the best ways that I think that as students we can start to see that what we experience is a result of what we thought. patterns, ruts, being stuck in a rut. Now, in the movie Groundhog Day, of course, the pattern was very obvious because it repeated itself every 24 hours. Every morning that clock went off and the people on the radio said, "It's Groundhog Day." It didn't take Bill Murray too awful long to figure out, something was wrong here. He was stuck in a rut. For most of us, it's not that obvious. For most of us, it takes years maybe for the cycle to repeat itself before we start to get a handle on it. So I'll give you some examples. In the area of relationships, I have people tell me that, they left a relationship, they went off with another person, or they started a relationship with another person. And over a few years' time, the new relationship started to look and to feel very much like the old relationship. The pattern, the cycle, the rut had started to repeat itself. The same thing with jobs. People may work for a company and they may become very disgruntled working for that company, and they decide that they need to go work for another company, and they do. And then a few years later, they find that they're back in exactly or very similar circumstances, exactly the same or similar circumstances to what there were before. The names and the faces have changed, of the people around them, the bosses and the co-workers and the employees and things like that. But very much the same issues are there. The same issues are surfacing. The same conflicts are surfacing. Everything is kind of coming up the same again. People will they'll get in a car and they'll move from one part of the country to another part of the country. So I can't stand living here anymore. These people here, they're just, I don't like them anymore. And they move across the country, and then a few years later they find that they're back in a similar situation. The neighborhood is much the same. The neighbors are much the same. You may remember this in the old story about the fellow who was driving down the road in Pennsylvania, and he came and he stopped at a farmhouse, and there was an old Quaker farmer sitting out on the porch. And the man said to the farmer, he says, "Can you tell me how to get such and such a town?" And the farmer told him, and the man says, well, what kind of people do you think I'll find there? And the farmer said to him, he says, "Well, what kind of people were in the last town you were in?" And the guy told him, he says, "You'll find the people there very much the same." And a little while later, another car pulled up, and same thing. A man got out, says, "Farmer, can you tell me how to get to this town?" And he says, "Yeah." He told him. And the guy says, "Well, what kind of people will I find there?" And the farmer says, "Well, what kind of people were in the last place that you lived?" And the fellow told him. And he says, "Well, you'll find those people there." And the other person sitting on the porch says, the farmer says, "How can you do that? The one person described people who were kind and good and friendly, and you told them that they would find them there. And the other person described people who were mean and cheating, and you told him, yeah, well, he would find them there, And the farmer said, yes, because the people he's going to meet are a reflection of his consciousness. John Kabat-Zinn wrote a book called Wherever You Are, Wherever You Go, There You Are, Wherever You Go, There You Are. And the reason that we find ourselves repeating these patterns, whether it be in finances, whether it be in relationships, whether it be in work, whether it be in our living conditions, the reason that we keep repeating these patterns is that we haven't changed our consciousness. We haven't changed our consciousness. One of my colleagues, who was minister here in Charlotte for a while, she gave a talk one time. I happened to be there that Sunday, and she gave a talk one time about being stuck. And she said she had to finally come to the realization in her own life that when she was stuck, it was because she hadn't made a choice to become unstuck. This idea of living consciously, of living deliberately, of choosing and choosing wisely, I think this is something that we really have to drive home as being the most important thing that we can do with our life. as human beings, we have the ability to become self-aware. We can become mindful. Emerson said that we are already inlets who may become outlets of the divine. But we don't have to. We don't have to. See, we can choose to repose. We can choose to remain asleep. I love what Joel Goldsmith tells us. You know, he says that in the book of Genesis, we're told that God placed Adam into a deep sleep. Remember, Adam wanted a mate, and God put Adam into a deep sleep and created Eve. But nowhere in the Bible are we told that Adam woke up. Nowhere. And what Goldsmith does is he says, we're all stuck in that Adam dream. You and I, we're all stuck in that Adam dream. It's like the movie The Matrix. We're in the dream and we really don't want to wake up sometimes, you know. But it's you know, the superhero in that movie, Keanu Reeves, he kind of kicks out of the dream. He kind of comes out of the dream. And then he finds there's other people who have awakened from the dream. You're trying to encourage people to come out of the dream. So we go through our lives and we kind of are born into it. You know, as Buddhists tell us, the game was in progress when we got here. And we kind of get born into this life. And now it's up to us to awaken. It's up to us to become aware of what we are thinking, to become aware of what we are believing, and to deliberately choose. To deliberately choose. And this is what mindfulness is all about. This is why mindfulness is such a powerful spiritual practice. You don't need any special equipment to do it. You don't need to go to any special place to do it. You know, it helps when you're starting to practice if the lights are low and you have perhaps incense and candles and soft music. You know, they might get you in the mood to help you enter into this state of self-awareness and self-reflection. But once you start to become an adept at it, you can do it everywhere, and you can do it all the time. Just simply being present, simply being present. So when we start to see a pattern emerge in our lives, when we start to see that we're stuck in this loop, whatever that loop might be for us, just like for Bill Murray, it was Groundhog Day. For us, it may be another area of our lives. It may be, as they say, our job or our relationships or our finances. When we pay attention to those patterns, then that gives us the opportunity to choose. What do I really want to have happen here now? See, we have the ability to choose. We have the ability to be aware of what we are choosing. And yet, we often don't. And that's what we must do. That's what we must do. We must become aware, or we must stay aware. Emmett Fox says we have to change our mind and keep it changed. We must awaken and not go back to sleep. You know, it's kind of like the kids. You know, the clock goes off and you call them for the school bus and, yeah, I'm up, Ma, I'm up. You know, and then you go back 10 minutes later and they've got the pillow over their head and they've gone back to sleep. We tend to do that. As we are going through our spiritual awakening, we tend to do that. We tend to forget. We tend to go back. We tend to get distracted. In one of the tales of the Knights of the Round Table, there's a story about the knight who went on a quest to find the holy city, and he found it. And there, when he got to the holy city, you know, the people welcomed him as a king, and he was going to spend the rest of eternity. He was going to be their king, and they were going to be his subjects, and everything was going to be wonderful. And then a knock came to the door of the castle, and it was a page from Camelot. And the page said, "Sir Knight, have you forgotten you've got business back in Camelot? You've got property, you've got family, you've got bills to pay, things to do. You can't just abandon all that." So the knight told the people, he says, "Well," he says, "I have to go close up a few things, bring some things to closure, but I'll be back. And of course, when he got back to Camelot, he forgot about the holy city. See, he got right back into the swing of things. And that's another story that creates a visual picture, but it has a moral theme. That's us, that's you and I, that's each and every one of us. We step into the spiritual realm and we say, oh, isn't it wonderful that I live in a universe where it is done unto me according to my belief, and I will deliberately choose what I believe. I will take time to pay attention to what I'm thinking. And then we get distracted and we go right back to our day-to-day lives. So the quest for us is to become aware and to deliberately choose. And if you remember the movie, if you remember in the movie Groundhog Day, when Bill Murray's character, the character that he played, when his character started to become aware of what was going on, he didn't understand it. He didn't understand it, but he understood that it was going on. You know, he didn't know why it was going on. He didn't know how to break out of it, but he knew it was going on. And the first thing he started to do was he started to have fun with it. He started to play with it. He had lived through the day so many times that he knew exactly what was going to happen next. He had seen it before. It was all very familiar to him. And he was able to if you remember the scene where I guess it was his brother, Brian Doyle Murray, was supposedly the mayor of the town, and he was choking on a piece of steak, and Bill Murray goes over and gives him the Heimlich maneuver, and he turns it into this big dramatic show and all these kind of things. He knows what's going to happen, and he plays with it for a little while. He has fun with it for a little while, but then soon that gets boring. And what he does is he starts, at least in my recollection of the movie, he starts improving himself. He starts learning. He starts growing. He starts helping other people. And when he breaks out of the dream, and then he breaks out of staying in the dream but being self-centered, that's when the next morning the clock shifts over. And he's now moved past Groundhog Day. You and I have to make a conscious choice. If we are stuck in a rut, we have to make a conscious choice to get out of that rut. If we are not in a rut, we still have to make a conscious choice. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves in a rut. We're going to find that those areas of our consciousness that we have not paid attention to, that we have not done anything to improve, right? That there's a power in the universe that responds to those areas exactly according to our belief. And they will start to emerge as patterns in our lives. So we have the ability, but we also have the responsibility. There's nobody else who can change your consciousness but you. I can't do it for you. You can't change mine for me. Hearing about it is good, but practicing it is better. We have to take that time to decide, well, what kind of day am I going to have? What kind of life am I going to have? How am I going to love today? How am I going to serve today? I think the important thing to keep in mind is it is for that purpose we have come. It is for that purpose we were born. Divine love has given us the ability to be self-aware. And we have to start using that ability. I think as human beings, that's probably, the thing that we can do that we don't know whether any other species can do it, but we know that we can do it, and yet we seem to do it the least. We want to learn how to get through our day in routine with as little thought as possible. And yet we have been created to choose. We have been created to decide. We have been created to look at this thing called life and to determine how we want to go through it, one day at a time, one thought at a time. So keep the picture of the movie in your head. Keep that picture, and if you haven't seen it, please, find it and look at it. But keep that image in your head of this individual who is stuck over and over and over again, doing the same things until he makes a conscious choice to do something different. That is the image of our own lives. We must become aware. We must consciously choose. And then we must use the tools that we have been given, the spiritual tools in our toolbox that we have been given. Meditation, observing our thoughts, it gives us a couple benefits. We become aware of the thoughts that are passing through, but it also teaches us to detach from those thoughts. We are not those thoughts. We are the observer of those thoughts. Treatment is a specific process that gets us to deliberately choose. Visualization is a visual treatment. Instead of using words, we're using images to see the end that we desire as an already accomplished fact. And affirmations are a way of deliberately working with our subconscious mind to shake up and dissolve any areas of disbelief, any areas where we don't agree. So by affirming the thing that we know to be true, but we may not quite believe it yet, by affirming it, what we're doing is it's kind of like sending a little signal down into your subconscious. The sound of the hammer hitting. Remember the TV show? They used to open with the hammer hitting the steel wedge. Break that up. Break that up. Shake it loose. What it comes down to is this: you are the only thinker in your universe, and your life is a result of what you choose to think or choose to ignore. When we first become aware of that, it seems like a tremendous responsibility. Sometimes it brings a lot of guilt because we say, oh my God, why did I bring all this mess in my past into my life? And there's nothing you can do about that. Past is the past. It's done. What you can do is you can do something today. And what you do today becomes the future. As Raymond Charles Barker would tell us, is the future is the outpicturing of what we're thinking today. The power of the law working on what we're believing today is what is going to be our future. And that can change. Right? We're not predestined or predetermined for anything. We can't say, well, in the past I've always this, and therefore in the future I'm going to that. Nope. A new experience is just a new idea away. So I invite you then this week, really think about this. Really pay attention. What are you paying attention to? What are you thinking about? How much time are you giving in your day to being aware of what you're thinking about? If you look at your life, if you look back at your life, can you see patterns emerging? Can you see where the same things started to come up over and over again? If so, do you want to take one of those patterns and change it? Do you want to deliberately change your beliefs as it relates to that area of your life? Now, you don't have to get in there and find out what the old dysfunctional belief was, right? This is not psychoanalysis. You don't have to get down in there and find that and pull it out. You just replace it. You just cancel and replace. So up until now, there was something in my consciousness that was not in attune with good relationships, prosperity, good employment, good living conditions, those, whatever it might be. But today I accept peace and harmony and prosperity and love. And if everything is going great, if there's no problems to solve, then what is the bigger idea? What is a better idea? How can you take what you have and expand it? See, the universe is unlimited and it's always expanding. How can you take what you have and make it even bigger? How can you make it even better? How can you make it inclusive and bring other people into it, into the goodness that you're experiencing? Life is a matter of consciousness. There's a power in the universe that responds to us according to our consciousness. What is going on in our life is a reflection of that consciousness. We must take responsibility to deliberately choose the beliefs that are the mental equivalent of that which we wish to experience. And if we're experiencing anything less or anything different, then simply we go back and do a cancel and replace. You are the very love of God. You are the very expression of God on this earth. When the divine said, let there be, and there was. Let there be light, and there was light. Let there be a universe, and there was a universe. That is the image that the Bible gives us to teach us the moral theme, the moral idea, that it is done unto us according to our belief. The only question you have to ask and answer for yourself is, do you believe that? And are you willing to work with it? This is the stuff that life is made of. I think it's somewhere in Proverbs it says, keep with diligence all the matters of your heart, for out of it is the stuff of life. And I'm paraphrasing. Your heart being your subjective or subconscious mind. Keep with diligence. Keep with diligence. If the doorbell rang right now and you looked out the peephole and there was somebody there and you didn't know who they were, you would not open the door and let them into your house. You'd holler through the door, who are you? What do you want? You know, what are you doing here? Go away. You know, if they're selling something. You need to guard your thoughts. You need to guard what do you let into your consciousness the same way. Don't believe anything just because you heard it on TV or read it on the internet. You must choose. You must choose. Is that my truth? Or not? You're the only one who can decide. And today is the time to start deciding, more so than yesterday, more so than last week, more so than last year. As you do that, the conditions in your life will change. And so it is. Let's come together then with a closing treatment. And this closing treatment is for action. The divine is always in action. Everything in the universe is in action. The earth is rotating. The sun is rotating. Both are moving through space. The space of the galaxy is moving through the space of the universe. The space of the solar system is moving through the space of the galaxy. Everything in God's creation is in motion. The atoms, the electrons, everything is in action. Divine love has created us out of itself as its instruments of action here on this earth. And our primary action is one of thought. So we accept today our ability and our responsibility to choose our thoughts and to choose them wisely. And we do so. We deliberately take time on a daily basis to choose the type of day we will have, the type of experience we will have, the way that we will be God's instruments of love on this earth that day. And tomorrow we will do the same. We are grateful for the opportunity to be reminded of these truths. And we release this treatment to that perfect law, so certainly it is done, that we say together, and so it is. Tomorrow night,